Welcome into another episode of the A-List podcast. I'm Kwani A. Lunis, joined by Sherrod Blakely and Gary Washburn. Welcome to another week to talk about the Celtics and the progress they've made or haven't made. How are you two feeling?
I'm feeling James Brown good about this team right now. Feeling really good about where they're headed, what they're doing, what they can do. Look, the glass is half full for me right now. Rob Williams or no Rob Williams, I'm feeling really good about where they are right now.
It's a bold statement. How are you feeling, Gary?
I want to see what happens this week. I feel like they have a chance to do some really great things in the playoffs, and we'll see what happens with their seed. They can still get number one, to be honest with you, if they win out. But number two, I think it would be really pretty amazing feat if they got the number two seed after what they've gone through this season. So, but I was pleased with the Washington game, bouncing back after Indiana. I thought it would be kind of inverse, like they blow out Indiana and have a tough time with Washington, but it was a reverse. But it was good to see them blow out and take care of a team they were supposed to. So I think they're in a good place.
Yeah, and of course, we talk about the standings. They've fluctuated on a daily basis, so it's not even worth talking. As you mentioned, that blowout win at the TD Garden, that was actually their last regular season home game, so congrats to them for pulling that off.
Go out like a champ.
Yeah, that's how you should go. But Sherrod, you did mention Robert Williams. That's obviously a big void on this roster for them right now. What adjustments have you seen on the defensive end for them, and who do you think should be stepping up to try to fill that void?
Well, they're not going to find someone to fill that void. It's going to be cut and paste. They're trying to they're trying to patch this thing up and just get to the finish line without Rob, and hopefully get to the second round, which I think is the earliest we could possibly see him back on the court. But I like what I'm seeing out of Daniel Theis. He's not going to be Rob. I don't think he's Rob-like or even Rob-light. He's just Daniel Theis. He's going to run the floor. He'll play decent defense. He's not going to play great defense. He's not going to give you that roaming defensive back, Ronnie Lott type of defense that we see from Rob out there, where he's just covering so much ground. But he's going to do what he can do. He's going to get you some points. He's going to give you a little bit more of a perimeter threat. But my concern with him isn't so much him scoring. It's him taking shots to score. Teams are going to sleep on him offensively the way they've done Rob, and he has to play. But part of that is the Tatums, the Browns, the Al Horfords empowering him in game to take those wide open shots when they're there. Don't hesitate. Just let it fly. And I think if he's able to do that, he can certainly help them. And Grant, who's going to place a lot more center as well, it's more position. It's more about matchups. He's not a natural center that they can just kind of plug and play out there. There's certain matchups that he can be effective, others not so much. So I think you're really going to see Daniel Theis. They're going to lean on him a lot heavier than they want to, and obviously Al Horford.
Well, I think they're just learning. I just saw the transition of learning to play more with Theis and kind of understanding that Rob's not coming back for a while. And I thought they struggled with that. Well, they also struggled like against Indiana. I mean, they struggled with like Tyrese Halliburton. Who was just getting out anything he wanted, coming off the pick and roll. And luckily for them, he fouled out of the game. If not, they might have lost the game. But he had 30 points in like 28 minutes or whatever. I thought that they adjusted better, obviously, Sunday with Theis being there. With Theis being kind of a presence in the middle, but not that shot blocking presence. I think they were more aggressive defensively before players got to Theis in the paint. Like, that's what they're going to do. They're going to be better defenders before these ball handlers get to the paint, because they don't have that eraser that Robert Williams was, at least not until the second round. So I thought that they started to make adjustments. I mean, they shot the ball well offensively. They shot 56%. They just torched the nets. But I also thought defensively, they were just a little bit better, and they just challenged a lot more things against Washington. I mean, the Wizards had capable players, Porzingis, KCP, Corey Kesper, they had guys who, and they had dropped 135 points on the Dallas Mavericks and beat them pretty good up in Washington. That's 2 days before. So the way they were able to challenge their shots, especially after, the 37-point second quarter, and I think Ime put the screws in at halftime today, fellas, were like, what are we doing out here? And just the way they were dominating the second half, I thought that was good adjustments because you can still play good defense without Robert Williams being there. You just got to be better. You just got to stop players from diving into the paint so easily. Tatum, Brown, Smart needs to be better. Smart can't take as many chances thinking, I got Robert back there with some of these steals he goes for or whatever. Or maybe, risking getting into foul trouble or that type of thing in terms of being over-aggressive. Sometimes you got to play more at home with Tice in the middle, and I thought they did that.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, I think defensively, Gary, to your point, they absolutely have to be more conservative in terms of their approach. They have to be solid and not necessarily spectacular. And that is going to be the key. But the one thing that I'm seeing with these guys without Rob, that I think they're starting to think about this and realize that it kind of has to be this way, but it's such a slippery slope with this particular team, is that they have to be better offensively than they've been in past to make up for that gap that's going to clearly be there at the defensive end of the floor. And in theory, that's a good idea and it makes a lot of sense. But the problem that I have with this particular group thinking too much about that is that they have a tendency to fall in love with what's happening on the offensive end, and it negatively impacts what they do defensively. And so Ime has to really find that delicate balance between getting a little bit more juice out of this group offensively, which they're capable of with Rob out and Tyson because of his perimeter shooting skills, but also make sure that they're still locked in and on the same page and connected defensively, because ultimately it is their defense that's going to help them continue to progress in the playoffs. But they're going to need a little bit more juice offensively because, again, that defense, no matter who they throw out there, isn't going to be nearly as good or nearly as tight as it was with Rob on the floor.
Yeah, and one person who has been there everywhere they need him to be when you talk about their offense is Jaylen Brown. In the last 9 games, 28.9 points per game, 56.7% from shooting, and 50% from three. But a fun fact, or not so fun fact, is a fact that we haven't seen him on a full postseason run since the bubble. So what are your expectations from him, especially when you look at this stretch of games that he's been on over the last few weeks?
You get that, Gary.
Well, I think he's playing some of his best basketball this season, and that takes a lot of pressure off Jayson Tatum, which is good, and both of them can play off each other. And I think that what defenses are going to do, as Miami did the other night, right, last week, is they're going to give Jaylen the ball and go beat us. And that fourth quarter against Miami, where Jayson Tatum took 3 shots and had, I think, 2 points or 3 points in the fourth quarter. Jaylen was 2 for 10. Like, that was the worst case scenario where Jaylen thought that he could take over and he couldn't. And then he had some turnovers, some missed layups. Didn't take advantage of some mismatches against like Max Strus that he should have. But over the last couple of games, it seems like he's becoming more comfortable, especially early in games. I think the goal of Ime is to get Jaylen going early, because Jaylen has always, really put up a lot of big first quarters this year. That's fine. Get Jaylen going, let Jayson kind of ease into the game, because you want to get Jaylen going and get that confidence going. But I think that the pressure is going to intense, because in playoffs, teams are going to make sure they shut Tatum down. They're going to double, triple, whatever they got to do, blitz, and make sure he's more of a playmaker. And Jaylen has to take advantage of that, because he's got to say, ain't nobody in the league can guard me one-on-one. That's what he's got to say. Ain't nobody can league. Max Strus, I don't care who, whatever. And he's got to be, to me, a more sure-handed ball handler in the paint. None of these strips and rips that happens when he tries to do too much or whatever. None of these like sloppy pocket passes. Jaylen's got to tighten up completely. He's doing that. He's on his way. And I think he's putting up the big numbers, as Kwani said, but he's going to need to do it when it's money time, when the playoffs come, because whoever they play in round 1 next weekend is going to make sure that Tatum does not score 40-something points and we lose. Like, that's a recipe for disaster. So it's going to be up to Jaylen to take pressure off Jayson and score also to make it where you really can't blitz Tatum as much.
Yeah, and you've got a situation where, unlike a lot of teams that have a really great dynamic scorer like a Jayson Tatum, you're not necessarily sure where your next elite level source of scoring is going to come from. But the Celtics don't have that problem. It's Jaylen Brown. He is the next best thing when you talk about scoring. We mentioned earlier, Kwani, when you mentioned how we haven't seen him in the playoffs since the bubble. In the bubble, you go back in the last times we saw him in playoff, he's giving you 20 points a night. In every series that he played. And that was when he wasn't nearly as good or well-rounded a player as he is now. So to me, the idea that Jaylen Brown is gearing up for the playoffs and is kind of, he's really eager to get that going again. That's a good thing for the Celtics because you got a guy who's hungry, who's thirsty, and has talent. It's not just enough to be hungry and thirsty. We got a lot of hungry and thirsty.
Damn, get him.
The facility is not feeding them.
Exactly. We need to feed that.
Auerbach Center?
We need to feed him, Gary. We need to feed him. Let's get the GoFundMe campaign. Feed Jaylen.
Feed Jaylen Brown. Wow.
Feed him some juice. Give him some more of the juice. He need more of the juice. You can't live off juice alone.
He tried to put all these analogies together, and it just didn't work the way.
We just got a big fat analogy smorgasbord here. But the bottom line is this:
Jaylen, hungry, he's thirsty.
The bottom line is Jaylen is poised to have a breakout postseason for so many factors. But for me, again, it comes down to how does he handle himself down the stretch? Because Jaylen's going to get you 25 a night. But if he giving me 23 in the first three quarters and it's a tight game and only getting 2 in the fourth, is that really helping the cause? So they need to figure out how can he be more consistently impactful because he is going to make his presence felt in the game. But what is he doing in cash money time? What do you do? Does he got that Robert Horry DNA gene rocking with it? Because you need cats who are going to be killers in the fourth quarter. Cuddly, 25 points for 3 quarters, I can deal with that. Give me killers in the fourth. That's what I need.
I mean, his turnaround shot at in the last game where that was clutch.
Didn't even know that was in the bag.
He has clutch moments. So
didn't even know that was in the bag. I was shocked. I was like, damn, what?
I was like, there's no way he's making it. He had no look, but perfect art. So we'll see. But another related part of the Jaylen Brown conversation is the fact that there's still speculation as to whether or not he is vaccinated. That's been a conversation that's swirling around the Celtics team overall because the front office has made the decision that they don't want to discuss it. And I can understand that perspective, but from a fan standpoint, there is definitely a lot of people who are concerned. If the season ends and they have to face Toronto, what does that mean for this team? What does that mean for the roster overall? So from your perspective, how important is it for them to, well, one, maybe just not get Toronto, but really figure out how to get ahead of this conversation?
Well, the only way it's going to be an issue is if they face Toronto. That's literally the only reason that we're having conversations about it now. The only reason that we'll be talking about it once the playoffs arrive. But if they do, I'm confident that they're going to have all their pieces available. If those guys aren't vaccinated yet, I think they will be. Certainly, they would. I believe the timetable would have them getting their shots this week, I believe, in order to make sure that they are within that window to be considered
eligible
and vaccinated. Yeah. So I'm not worried about that as much as a lot of people are. But it speaks to another issue that again, it's we're not going to solve it here, and certainly fans aren't going to get the answers they want. But players, they do have a certain amount of privacy that they should feel comfortable with keeping to themselves. Now, my only issue with the whole vaccination conversation is that if the issue regarding privacy was strictly about you and had no impact on anyone else, then by all means, cool. Yeah. But the domino effect of not knowing where you stand, or at least your teammates not knowing where you stand, is huge. If everyone on that team knows his status, but the media doesn't and the fans don't, I'm cool.
I'm okay with that, yeah. Which I think is the case. The way they talk about it.
That's right. And that's why it doesn't really bother me that much. But if it's to the point where those guys aren't sure what the hell is going on, that's a problem. And I will say this, and this will be the last point I'm making this and pass it off to Gary. you're going to draw parallels between him and Kyrie. It's inevitable because Kyrie didn't say what his status was until it became obvious what it was. And Jaylen has kind of kept that door somewhat ajar because for all we know, Jaylen just don't want to tell nobody. He's vaccinated, but just don't want to tell anybody.
Yeah.
And that's his right. That is his right. But it's so problematic because you're trying. This is such a weird time for the NBA because your fan base, you're trying to win them back. Yeah. Because you basically kept them to the curb because of the pandemic. Not no player's fault, but they have been basically on the sidelines for a while. Mm-hmm. And this is a time where your playoffs are rolling around. People are in the buildings unmasked. There's a giddiness about this team and about the playoffs in general. And this is one of those things that makes people pause like, but damn, am I going to pay like primo dollars to go see my favorite team? And I live in like Saskatchewan or I live in Toronto and he may not play. I don't know if he's going to play. And if he's not going to play, do I really want to pay to see my team play without their second best player? Yeah. So there's, again, I get where Jaylen's coming from, but at the same time, the main thing is, are you making sure your teammates and your coaching staff, all of them are in the loop? Because if they're in the loop, no problem. But if they're not sure, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I think Jaylen is a man of his convictions and beliefs. And I think that as a guy who who researches a lot of things, he probably is not very high on the vaccine as like a cure or a treatment, considering the history of vaccines, especially with people of color and African Americans. I can definitely understand that. Why do athletes want to keep their status to themselves? Or that's a private thing. But I also think it's like the whole none of your business or me to know and for you to find out stuff. This is a contagious disease, right? A virus, right? This is not cancer. This is not something that you can keep to yourself. That you can say, I have a disease that you can't, I have something that will allow me to play, I can still play, but it's a private thing that I'm dealing with. Like in that situation, this is a contagious disease. So the whole that's none of your business to know if someone's vaccinated or not. Well, it is because we're dealing with an unprecedented time. I never thought we would, you hear in the school or whatever, maybe not Kwani in the New Jersey school system, but
shots fired for no reason.
But when it was like the 1920s and people were dying of smallpox, and you were like, oh my God, how could these people, that was so long ago, how did these people die of some type of thing that just, you could, cure it with a shot? Yeah. Or people, polio shots in the 40s, and you hear these things that would seem so antiquated and so back in, mumps and things like that. And then here we go, and we're literally getting, hit with a pandemic that people are 100 years from now, when it's, either gone or done, people are going to be like, how, that killed almost 1 million people? What? Like, they're going to laugh at us, right? And so this is a serious situation, unprecedented situation that nobody in our generation has dealt with. So I think this whole, for me to know and for you to find out, like the Player Association, which Jaylen's on the committee, fought vigorously against mandatory vaccinations for players. But they, the NBA still comes out with the 97% are vaxxed, okay? And I got to give Kyrie props, not for a lot, but at least going public and saying, this is who I am. He's taking a lot of heat, and I'm sure a lot of players who are unvaxxed around the league are like, no, I ain't going through that. I'm gonna keep my status to myself.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna get hate mail. I ain't gonna get people telling me I'm an idiot and just get the shot and what's wrong with you and you don't like. So I think Jaylen has to have some conversations with what is important to him, because Toronto, tough team. You can't miss games 3 and 4 and 6 all willy-nilly. Like they're gonna need him. Okay, could they still win the series without him playing in 3 of the 7 games? Yeah, they could. They could. But it's something that if they lose that series and Jaylen stands by his convictions, if he's not vaccinated and says, I'm not playing, good luck, guys. Oh, boy. How does that affect his standing in the organization? him as a leader. That Kyrie thing broke up him, Harden, and Durant. That broke them up. And people are laughing at the Nets because the Nets caved in to Kyrie because Durant wants him to play. So there's not a lot of respect going around for how the Nets handled it when they said, no, you're not doing all this no home game, just road game stuff. Then, okay, well, we reconsider. Come on back and just play road games. If I'm Jaylen, and the team has got to just do some thinking, some discussions have to be had. They can't do the whole, well, that's every person upon himself. I'm not going to say anything about it because it's a topic. It's a critical topic in our society right now. You can't just, you can just do whatever the hell you want to do. I don't care. You should care. This is not a situation where this is a contagious disease. So being vaccinated, can keep you, getting vaccinated keep you from getting it and then spreading it. So I think that Jaylen and the organization have to do some heart-to-heart talking. And I'm sure Brad behind the scenes is. I understand they're not wanting to go public and be like, everybody, but then again, you need to figure out, okay, how is this going to go down? Okay, who are you going to get vaccinated before the playoffs? Are you going to wait till the seedings come out? You wait till Sunday to decide, what if you face Toronto in the second round? What's going on then? Yeah. Because Toronto could win their first round series.
Yeah.
Right? You doing Toronto ain't like the 10th seed. They could be 5. They could win their first round series. Okay. So even if you avoid them in the first round, you might get them in the second round. So this is something to definitely keep abreast of because this is not a situation that you can just say, we'll just let it handle itself. That's not the way to go. You can't let this handle itself.
Yeah, and the reality is other teams in the East, I'm sure, dealing with a similar situation, but I think Boston has made itself a headline as a result of not wanting to talk at all. We've talked about Jaylen Brown, but of course the star, the guy we have to talk about every week, Jayson Tatum, he was out with that right patella tendinopathy. Are we concerned about that, or do we think it was just general maintenance type of
You got it, G.
What'd you say, Kwani?
Are we concerned?
Not after that.
General maintenance.
Okay. I think it's just a sore knee. I think he's going to need to treat it. These guys ice their knees every night, so I just think it's something that I don't think it's not hasn't knocked him out of a game, but I do think he's going to need to rest, and we'll see what happens, like the finale against Memphis, or whether they practice on Saturday because they have Saturday off in Memphis, or where they just go and just take those 2 days off, and then what happens after the playoffs that Sunday, the Monday that week, whether he gets a rest or maybe a break, but they're just going to have to, I think, something to keep abreast of. It's it's tendonitis. So, you ice it up, you make sure that he doesn't put too much wear and tear off the court in terms of, or in practice and those type of things on it. And you keep it moving. I don't think it's something serious. And I think Jayson, you're going to have to drag him off the court unless it's a serious injury. I don't think he's going to miss a game with knee tendonitis. I think he'll be ready to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's much ado about nothing. And frankly, it gives the Celtics cover when they decide to go with, load management. A lot of times teams will just say, hey, we're just going to sit him just to sit him. But they like, well, you know what? We're not really sitting him. We're sitting him out because he's got a sore knee. Air quotes. So I just don't think it's that big a deal. I really don't. And because as long as Jayson can go out there and do what he does, which most nights, as Kwani and Gary, you've seen, he shoots the lights out most nights. So I don't think it's going to be that big an issue for him. I really don't.
I did notice in that Washington game that, early in the fourth, Jaylen and Tatum were still in the game. Overall, do you think that they should start getting pulled a little bit more as a team ramps up for the playoffs?
I want them to sit both of those guys at least one of these last 3 games.
Yeah.
I want to see that. I would probably, if it were me, I would probably sit them the Milwaukee game, only because I think you can beat Chicago without one of those guys, and have one play against Chicago and the other one play against Milwaukee. And then when you get to that Memphis game, if you're locked into whatever seeding you are, why put them out there? Sit them both. They need to start really looking at this last week from a strategic standpoint, because when you look at the strength of schedule this week, the Celtics have the toughest schedule according to different websites as far as the games they play and the winning percentage of those teams. But flip side of that is, Memphis for that last game, if they got that number 2 spot locked up, which they should have it by then, you're probably not going to see their core guys. And Milwaukee, you may see something similar to that. Although I think that Milwaukee, that's going to be a tough call for them whether to sit guys, because they're like the Celtics. They're right in that mix for that number 2 spot in the Eastern Conference. And that, you want to be as high a seed as possible. So lots of issues that they got to work through, but I think they'll be fine though.
So that being said, you mentioned that tough schedule that they're looking forward to. What do you think is a realistic finish for this season as we look forward to the final 3 games?
I think a realistic finish for these guys is to win at least one of those games. And I really want them to win at least one of the last 3 so that Ime can have 50 wins. And Ime will be only the 5th coach in franchise history to get 50 wins in his first season on the job. And so when you start looking at and again, we were talking earlier about like Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year. Ime better get some damn votes for Coach of the Year. It's going to be a little bit harder for him because this year there have really been some good coaches, and he's going to see at least one of them in that season finale with Taylor Jenkins, the job he's done with Memphis, which is one of the youngest teams in the NBA, and yet they've got the 2nd best record in the NBA. So those are the type of things that obviously when you think about Coach of the Year, you got to weigh in favor. But the fact that Ime has the potential to do something that only 4 other men who walked the sidelines with this franchise have ever done in their first year, that has to hold weight in the eyes of people who are making voting decisions, things like that.
Yeah.
I think they should want to go, I think 2-1. I think the Chicago game is tricky. The Bulls, it all depends on what the Bulls are trying to do. Okay, the Bulls, are they trying to go for 5? Are they trying to go for 6? Like, this is the time where teams are starting to figure out, okay, this is who we want to play, and this is who we don't want to play. Yep. Okay, do the Bulls want 5 or 6? Do they want to face Philadelphia or Milwaukee or even the Celtics in the first round? Like, I think they probably want to face the Celtics before anybody because, Milwaukee has Giannis, and Philadelphia has Embiid. Now, the Celtics do have Tatum and Brown, but they've had success in those 2 matchups. I mean, they're 1-1. So I do think they probably look at the Celtics as a team that's most vulnerable of those 2, or maybe, who knows, they might feel that about Philadelphia, right? But I think teams start to figure out, look at the schedule, like, okay, who do we want to play? So it'll be interesting to see what the Bulls do to against the Bucks tonight or Tuesday night. And then who they field on that home back-to-back with the Celtics on Wednesday. But I think if you're the Celtics, you try to get all 3. I think it's realistic. Milwaukee's not, just lost at home to Dallas. I mean, they're not unbeatable. You want to get that, and you want to get the tiebreaker. That's a tiebreaker game. Both games. Chicago is a tiebreaker game, but I don't think they'll be fighting with Chicago. But the Milwaukee's tiebreaker game. They're 2-1 against the Bucks. If they go 3-1 and any head-to-head or same record, then they get the advantage. So that's a critical game. You don't want to go 2-2. Remember the game they lost on Christmas, one of those regrettable losses that they had that they should have won, is going to burn them because but they beat the Bucks twice at home, and now time to get that road win. I think anything goes against Sunday against Memphis because it could be literally Aaron Nesmith and Sam Hauser and the boys against, but against Tyus Jones and because Memphis ain't gonna play their front line because they got the number 2 seed on lock, So Ja ain't gonna play in that game. Like you could have like the Memphis Hustle against the Maine Celtics in that game pretty much. So who knows? So I think if Celtics, you got to get 2 of these games. Like Sherrod said, get Ime that 50th win. Chicago's coming off a back-to-back tomorrow, so they'll be a little bit vulnerable. And then you got Milwaukee, always a challenge, but they played Milwaukee well this year. They should have won all 3 games. I say 2-1 at least. I mean, not saying you go gung-ho and you play Tatum and Brown 45 minutes each to get the win.
Yeah.
But you go and you try to finish the season strong and playing your best basketball, and you don't give up no games. Now who knows? This is when, like I said, it's like the school dance. People start picking out who they want to hook up with, right? And that's what teams are doing with the playoff seedings. Okay, who do we really want to play? Does Philadelphia want the 4? Or do they want the 2? Because if Philadelphia's 4, they face Chicago. Is Philadelphia like, listen, we'll face the Bulls or the Raptors, and then we'll take our chance with Miami in the second round. Who knows? Does Philadelphia want to see Milwaukee in the second round? This is all that these coaches are meeting about. The same with Milwaukee. Do we want to face the Celtics or the 76ers in the second round, or do we want to face Miami in the second round? Like, all this is all going in now. And so I said, this is how it is. And so I think teams you'll figure out over the next few days who wants to play who.
So what happens when both teams are obviously trying to lose a game?
We call that bad basketball.
It's interesting because that could definitely happen.
Yeah.
You got guys getting rest, and it's going to be an interesting week.
Yeah.
This whole playing thing.
Mm-hmm.
The playing adds another element to the season that we've never seen before, because you got now the Eastern Conference playing's set, but nobody wants to beat 10, have to play 2 road games. So they're going to fight for 10. Atlanta, Charlotte, Brooklyn, and Cleveland. Cleveland's got the advantage at 7. Brooklyn don't want to be 10, but Brooklyn could be 9, but they get a home game. Does Brooklyn, all this comes up. So they're playing to the finish, because if you don't want 10, you don't want to play at Brooklyn or, and then at Charlotte to get into the playoffs. Like, you want to try to get a home game. And, so that's going to be an interesting element too, that 8, 9, 10, because I think Cleveland kind of has 7 set, but 8, 9, 10, all in, Atlanta, Charlotte, Brooklyn are all fighting. So, and Brooklyn's got a pretty easy one against the Rockets. But Charlotte's got some tough games. It's going to be fascinating. This week. This is what the league wanted. Intrigue all the way down to the final games of the season.
And they got it. Well, we have a lot to look forward to in the next week. What are you guys looking forward to on your part-times? Well, you have a full-time. You have a bunch of part-time jobs. Everyone's always busy.
What is she talking about, Gary?
I'm talking about your jobs outside of basketball.
Gibberish.
I'm talking about your jobs outside of basketball. Specifically, Sherrod.
I'm just glad you're here, Kwani, to just light things up for us. So that's...
I literally did that today.
Yep.
Purple shirt, red shirt, whatever colors these are.
Absolutely. We count on you to light things up for us, Kwani.
I tried.
Let's see. Actually, I got a couple things. For Bleacher Report, we're actually doing our superlatives for the NBA, our picks for NBA MVP, Player of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year.
We'll do that next week.
Yeah, and that's gonna.
Wow, what's the difference between MVP and Player of the Year?
I was thinking about college basketball. My bad.
There's a Player of the Year.
He added a new award.
Man, listen, I've been soaking in all.
Is it like Jerome for Martin, like the Player of the Year? Like the Player of the Year for Jerome.
Well, I know the Player of the Year didn't go to Washburn University. That's school you represent on your shirt.
That's right. The Player of the Year.
With the mascot, the Iditarod as the mascot.
The Player of the Year, the Player of the Year award. That's a nice name.
Not at Washburn University. In Topeka.
Do they have a basketball team there?
They do. They're Division II. They're the Fighting Ichabods.
Wow.
Yes.
You really should have just went there.
Yeah, I should have went there. That's
for those who are listening, he's wearing a shirt that says Washburn University, which is why
Washburn University.
Yeah.
WU.
So woo.
They wouldn't even give me a hookup. No family discount for you.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Bought this on campus. I've been to Washburn University, so to not get this online or nothing, this is
the family reunion at college. Okay.
That's a family reunion.
I mean, you have no idea when you go into a student store and see everything with your name on it. You're like, oh, like he's like, oh, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna get that, I'm gonna get that.
Unfortunately, that will never happen to me. So I am happy for you.
Like
no Lunis University.
On it. You're like, oh my God, I'm home. Like,
can we get a Lunis Community College up in here somewhere?
Why I gotta be a community college?
Wow,
it would be
Polytechnic Institute,
a strong D2, it's a strong D2 program.
Nice.
Is that what they call it?
I think they're the same like conferences like Pittsburgh State and those type of schools. But
okay,
yes, the Fighting Ichabod. Look them up.
Always learn something new with
weirdest mascot in America, the Ichabod.
They actually admitted that too.
And they admit it,
It is.
What you got, Mr. Washburn University, besides talking about your family reunion?
Just follow this team into the playoffs. Got some other stuff going on. Working on stuff about the history of the league and what the league used to do. I'll have some more details in terms
starting with
of
the ABA. We're going all the way back.
Huh?
I said we're going all the way back to the ABA.
No, not that far, but almost 20.
Okay.
Before you was born.
I was waiting for some kind of shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So yeah, working on that and just prepping for the playoffs. It should be very exciting. This is one of the best parts of the sports year, I think. I mean, college hoops just ended, but last week in the regular season, baseball starts, I think, tomorrow. Thursday, April 7th. Baseball starts finally after they got their issues rectified.
Right.
The Masters, Tiger, we get
might be back, might not. Who knows?
Yeah, he's back. He's gonna play. So Tiger adds more intrigue, and so we get kicked into the spring season, and so it should be fun. The NBA playoffs is always a great time, and it's good for the Boston fans to have hope. I mean, I think last year when they were playing Brooklyn without Jaylen, it's like, we're gonna get crushed, and they pretty much did. Now, I think for the Celtic faithful, it's good for them to have hope that you can get them first, and they can make a long run. Because I don't think anyone in the East is invincible. I think Miami has some goods and some bad. So does Milwaukee's not inflappable. Milwaukee is, like I said, they lost at home the other day. They're out with full squad to Dallas. So everybody's beatable. So are the Celtics. But if the Celtics put the right things together, they got a chance to make a good run.
So what he's saying is anything is possible.
Yeah, thanks, Kwani.
Well, wow. I'll be on the hub today this week. You mentioned opening day. We're going to have a live show on NBC 10 that day as well. So that will be exciting. But until then, we have a lot to talk about next week because it'll be wrapping up the regular season. Thank you all for listening. I'm Kwani A. Lunis. That's Sherrod Blakely and Gary Washburn. This is the A-List Podcast, and we'll be back next week.
Lunis Institute of Technology.
Institute of Technology.
Kwani, what's that jersey and back
lit. I'm trying to make your school lit. Lunis Institute of Technology. We lit.